everybody, Scout Crafter here again. It's Monday. Hope you had a fantastic weekend. It went fast, didn't it, this weekend? Couple things to talk about today. First of all, last week we had a great week with videos, and one of the videos we talked about what you thought about whether to use a flat washer with a lock washer. Some fantastic responses to that. I'm really impressed with the knowledge that you subscribers have. It's incredible, and it's always nice to see people kick in with their own personal information. And some people work in industries, where they were saying, one gentleman mentioned about the tab lock washers that they have on Caterpillars. Caterpillars, the bulldozers and things. Now, for anybody that knows about a Caterpillar knows that if any fastener could loosen up, it'll be on one of those. Because, the diesel engines on those things there, they tend to run a little bit on the rough side, and it's always shaking. So it's those kind of vehicles that you really need something. But a few people had asked me, why didn't I mention anything about the Nordlock washers? That's the newer split washers. They come, it's like a two-piece washer system. And the reason that I didn't mention those is because I don't think they're really homeowner friendly, more or less, as far as price goes. Those things can run $1 each or something like that. And for homeowners to spend $1 on the lock washers, it's a little bit much, for most of us. I know NASA has washers, things like that you could say. But when we start getting up there in price, I usually don't too much include it into our discussions. But they are a viable source. And if you did have something that needed a lock washer that did stick, apparently those are the ones to have, but you get what you pay for, right? So let's start off today with continuing with that conversation, and we're going to talk about real quick about 3 types of nuts that are pretty much standard in the industry. And I do not have, I know I have them, I just don't know where they are. But I have to make a jam nut. So let's make one on the lathe and then talk about it. Now, one interesting factor when dealing with fasteners is when we talk a regular nut, like there are 3 basic types of nuts, and they are high nuts, which they're a little bit taller than a standard nut. A standard nut has a standard size. A high nut is the same size internal threading, but just a little bit longer. And you could see the difference maybe here, like if they're compared, you could see how much taller a high nut is. High nuts are easier to engage with a wrench, and they also give more thread contact, which will give you a stronger bond. But the funny thing is, a couple people have brought up jam nuts. Jam nuts are something that a lot of people don't even know exists, but this is what a jam nut looks like. And it's it looks like a nut that was cut in half. And you say, well, what is this for? This has a specific use of jamming the 2 nuts together on a threaded portion so that you can have purchase on that bolt or rod. And I'll show you what that means. Now, this is a typical application for what we call a jam nut. This is a piece of threaded rod. Sometimes you have to insert or twist a piece of threaded rod without damaging the threads. And what you would do is you would take 2 nuts and you would twist them against each other. Once you do that, you can operate the top nut as if it was a bolt head. And when you need to release it, you can just twist them apart from each other, and you can take them apart. Now, some people use this as a type of lock washer, and that's where the jam nut comes into place. The jam nut is half the size of a regular nut, so you could screw it on, give it a crank down, and that'll act as a lock washer. However, we found out through some of the vibration testing, that they really don't work as well as we think they do. But there are so many very good uses for jam nuts. I use them all the time. And another thing that I didn't mention last time was the Loctites and things like that. And Loctite is great. There's medium strength, high strength. There's all different types, and they work well. But a lot of people misuse it. They don't. A lot of times the threads really do have to be clean to work really well. But for a ton of applications, this stuff is fantastic and all you need as far as not backing off. But it will not cure the problems of excessive vibration and shaking and things like that. There, that's why we have to deal with mechanical locking devices. Well, looking for a project to do today, I was looking under one of the benches I have over there, and under the bench, there's this kind of tool tray. It's an old tool tray from an old toolbox maybe, and in this box was a bunch of just oddball tools that, they were some of my grandfather's, my father's, thrown around for years. And I remember I used to use this tool tray. I had a 1951 Pontiac Chieftain that I bought when I was, I guess I was maybe 20 years old or so. It took me 15 years to try and restore this car because I was doing everything myself and it took forever. And I learned a lot from that. One thing I learned is try to stay away from restoring antique cars if you can. However, I used to bring this box outside and do it. And there's all kinds of old tools that, like I said, were my grandfather's and father's. Here's a nice old Stanley ball peen, beautiful, kind of a long handle, but for some reason it just don't seem wrong with this one. But this is a nice one. It's an 8-ounce, and I like lighter hammers, and I remember doing this as a kid. This was one of my first tool restorations. I remember this thing was all rusted, and what I call a restoration, but I remember taking it to the wire brush, and it's a Yankee. And it's a ratcheting screwdriver. And I remember wire brushing it, and I did something with the handle. I forget what I did, but, this is obviously due for a redo. But but all these I used to use on that car, restoring it. And I found this, and I said, do you know what this is? This is a ball driver. And Scott's Tool Thoughts, a good friend of mine, Scott, did a great episode on these, and what these are actually no joke there. And listen to the ratcheting on here. Super fine ratcheting, to loosen and tighten. You would just turn it around, and I use this so much I know the ball seams, it's just for some reason the thing worked, and they still sell these today. They were made in the USA. And I bought this, I guess, at US General, one of the early tools I bought, and believe it or not, they work. And I said, let me clean this up real quick and show you what it looks like. Well, taking this apart, I noticed that, I had to put on the lathe actually because the rust was so bad, but I noticed that it was very loose in one side. So we took it apart the best we can here, and you could see how this works. It's very interesting. Again, this might be the knockoff here. I don't know if it says, well, I see something made in you see it over says made in Taiwan. Okay, so this is made in Taiwan. This isn't the USA one, and it is kind of an odd, but I'm telling you, it's such a great design. Look over here at the cams. How this works is there's 3 separate cans, and when you turn it, you see how it'll loosen, but then when you go to turn the other way, it locks up. It won't. All 3 of them lock up. So, but it did crack over here somewhere. I must have over-torqued it. So I'm going to try and repair it the best I can. We'll put it back together and see what it looks like. I just had some great dinner. We're back down in the shop for a second half. And I was reading through again some of the comments. And boy, this is a real discussion we started here with this washes. And I'm so glad to see that you're interested in this kind of subject, So I thought I would just indulge a little bit more into it, and because a lot of people were under the impression that it was the spring action of the split washers that is performing the actual locking ability to it, but there's more to it, and let me just go into it just a little bit deeper, and I'll show you what I mean. Now, they do make actual spring washers made to exert force, sometimes for a preload situation. Most popular or common type is called a Belleville washer, and that looks like this. It's a conical shaped washer like this, and as you add pressure to it, it deforms. It's made from a kind of a springish steel that will exert a lot of pressure up. Now, these are also used as kind of a spring or a preload for different nuts by stacking them, by putting one reversing against another. So now you have the 2 springs pushing against, so you can have all kinds of tension built up on that nut for whatever you want. Another type of spring type washer. You might have seen these before, these kind of wave washers. Now, this one here, you have this type here, and then you also have the real springy one, the one that's usually black and has a bunch of waves to it. They call that a wavy washer. You see them a lot in electronics and things like that. That also gives more of a uniform pressure against the nut to try and stop it from back. Again, most of these have been deemed kind of useless for what they were designed for initially. Okay. So when dealing with this split washer, this design of this washer, remember, of course there's going to be, remember I was telling you about the spring resistance because the way this is designed, and of course the spring resistance will give a little bit of resistance from this turning off, because listen to this nut, listen to the sound. I hope you can pick that up. That's how loose this nut is on that bolt. Because I was telling you that the machinists have different fits and engineers have different fits. So this would be considered like a 75% fit. It's a very loose fit. It's a general fit. But they also have 85 and they also have 90. You know, so they have fits that are very tight to begin with. Obviously, those are going to be harder to loosen up, and they would have that on machines that are more vibration prone. Now, this here, on the other hand, if you ever notice, the reason that this is made this way, every single lock washer that you've seen like this, if you all notice, it's a left-handed helical, which means if you take a standard right-hand nut and start cranking down on it, you'll see if it starts to loosen up, that corner will dig into the nut, stopping it from loosening up. That's another reason why these are not recommended for super hard surfaces. Okay, that's number one. And number two, they're not recommended. You can't use these with left-handed bolts because it's opposite. This is what a left-handed lock washer would look like. It would be completely opposite. I made this, but you see the difference? Because now, as this tightens down, lift, it'll lock this way. So that's why, and that's also why a good lock washer is not cut directly across. It's cut on a slight angle. If you notice, that angle gives you more of a bite. That's what that's for. It's all about bite. But again, these things have been kind of, you know, thrown out by most manufacturers because of the fact that they don't work as they, you know, should be or were intended to. It's also been recommended by certain, again, it all depends on who you talk to, but it's recommended that you do not use a flat washer for the reasons we were discussing before. But again, this is all, you know, this is what we're all talking about. You know, we've all have our own uses and we use it for it. Now, I know that 90% of the, if we putting together exercise equipment for the gym, that always came with a flat washer, lock washer, nut. You know, but you know, that's not the kind of vibration you're getting on a P47 Thunderbolt, is it? We didn't go crazy with this. This was more of a sentimental fix for me, but I cleaned it up, and this has been thrown around, and what I did here was I had to turn it, like I said, down on the lathe to get that polished up and everything, but it's real nice, and look how smooth this works, you know. Now, the original ball drivers were called easy drivers, and I rewatched Scott's fantastic video. I'll have a link in the description, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a full episode on these ball drivers, the real ones, coming up the end of this week. Let me show you how this. Now, like I said, I practically took apart my entire Pontiac with this this device, this little screwdriver. Watch how quick this works, and you get tremendous torque on here. The ball drivers really do work good. Very comfortable on the hand. There we go. Very nice little screwdriver, and we'll go through it next week. Okay, last up, real quick. You remember last week we went through this with Ben Mall. We had that little issue with this, the problem we had with this. Well, I went through my collection, and believe it or not, I do have a WISS, but it's not a high power, but it is a WISS. And the one thing that's a little bit different from this one, we'll compare this one to the Seymour Smith, which is really top of the line as far as garnets go. But what we're going to do is I'm going to clean this up real quick. So remember what it looks like. We got a little rust, we got a little, you know, discoloration, nothing bad. But we're going to clean it up, and then and then we'll take a look at how these differ. Now, the first thing is, whenever you're going to remove a nut like this that could be stubborn, you don't know or not, and you have the ability to put the head of the nut into the vise like this, by all means do it, because this, just the head of the nut, now you could work on this and you'll have no problem. Also, don't be stingy with the 50/50. And I do use a ZEP bottle that I get because you got to use HDPE, high density polyethylene, because you can't use, I know it's a little squishy because it evaporates or whatever. Inside, it's an airtight system, but just shake it up and use that. Okay, you know my favorite part. Remember what these WISS clippers look like before we started? And we're calling this project done. You can see here, it's just a nice cleanup here, and you can see how nice this came out. You know, it looks very nice. You know, I like this handle. You know, I love that dimpled effect on there. And you can see here we polished out, and we only did this with the fiber wheel because, again, you do not want to go too much. And then as far as this brass jaw, I didn't even bother taking it off. And I kind of go by this thing, if it doesn't need to come off, don't take it off, because a lot of times they peen these over a little bit at the factory, and you're going to take them off, then they might loosen up later on. Unless you need to address this or sharpen it or something, just leave it alone. As for this, you obviously have to take that off, but then we re-greased everything with fresh grease in there. I got to tell you, it wasn't smooth when I got it, but now, because this whole spring, you see there's a spring there. That spring was all rusted up, but we were able to do the insides in here. Look at that, all nice, and everything's nice and clean in there. And you can see how smooth this is now, because this is all greased with fresh grease, and you can see that again, we didn't even touch the edge. Again, don't bother, because you only get so many sharpenings out of these, and unfortunately this don't have the replaceable jaw. It's all one piece, that side. But let me show you how this cuts here. You can see this cuts like a dream, you know, and this is not that's not super thin stuff, but really nice. Again, I don't know if they're as good as the Seymour Smith. These things are fantastic, the original snap cuts. And again, replaceable jaws on there, and they're high carbon steel. I think if you had to buy one, I think these are the ones to go for. But very interesting, huh? Very interesting with the, and again, with this WISS logo, again, you could see here it was a later issue than Ben's model. Ben had that beautiful WISS insignia on there and whatnot, but they did come out nice, so I'm very happy with these. So in closing, that was a fun little episode to start the week. I hope you have a great beginning of this new week, and have a nice day. Take care. Bye-bye now.